Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Jesse Green here at the control panels, and today super pumped because we're having a conversation about a topic that I really get into. It's about business metrics that matter. And there's that wonderful saying from Peter Drucker, the great business thinker of our time, that what does not get measured does not get managed. So we've got to be able to understand the numbers that we need to keep an eye on, and of course, how to make changes to move those numbers in the right direction. In today's conversation, we're going to be starting with the granddaddy metric of all, and that is cash flow, because there's that great saying that revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash flow is king. Now, before we get into that conversation about mastering cash flow, understanding it, I wanted to share a couple of public service announcements. For those people who are new to the podcast, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. If you'd like to come and join us in the sister group to this podcast, please come and find us at the Savvy Dentist Facebook group. You can head across to drjessegreen.com/Facebook and find us there. It's a dentist only group, and we'd love to see you there if you're a dentist. Another resource for you that's free, of course, is the Savvy Dentist app. And on that app, we've got plenty of content, and we'll be sharing some more content as time progresses. And you can head across to your favorite app store of choice, the Apple App Store, or indeed Google Play. So please do take advantage of those free resources, and they'll help you in your business journey. But let's get back to business metrics. Imagine that you're flying an F-111 or an F-16 or some fighter jet, something that goes really, really fast. Imagine if you got into the cockpit and fired it up and just took off. Now, if you're a pilot with lots of training, that's fine. You'll probably be okay. But if you're a pilot or a wannabe pilot with limited or no training, then chances are you're going to have an accident, and there's a real risk of dying, crashing, or whatever. And that's because there's two types of flying. There's visual rated flying, where you essentially look out the window of the aircraft. And if you're flying from where I am in Canberra to Sydney, for instance, you would fly out of the Canberra airport, head to the Brindabella Mountains, turn right, go north along the ocean until you see Sydney Harbour Bridge, and away you go. That's visual rated flying. Now, the problem, of course, with visual rated flying is that as soon as nighttime falls, or as soon as there's a storm, or as soon as something clouds the window, you can't see where you're going. So there's a real risk of actually crashing that aircraft. Now, what is the opposite of visual rated flying is instrument rated flying. And that's when, of course, a pilot has enhanced training. They know how to read the dashboard. There's all sorts of dials and knobs and levers and things there that tell them where they are in time and in space so that they can be safe as they fly. And really, the point I'm trying to make in all of that is understanding your business metrics is like being able to read a dashboard, knowing what levers to pull under certain conditions, and knowing whether you're safe or whether you're not, and what to do about it. So I think there's a real need to be able to understand our businesses from a numbers perspective. And what I find is so many business owners use their gut, their intuition, and the general vibe of what they feel is going on without getting into the hard numbers. Some numbers are easy to find. Some numbers need a little bit more investigation, of course, but being able to understand them is key. So as I said, we're going to start today with a conversation around cash flow. And I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king. And yet it's amazing to me that most people, when they focus on their business, they're looking at the top line only. They're not looking at the bottom line, the cash flow. They might look at the P&L, but they don't look at the cash flow. And cash flow is like oxygen. It's what keeps the business alive. Businesses never go out of business due to a lack of revenue. They go out of business because they've run out of cash. And cash is really, really important. So in today's conversation, of course, I want to be having a conversation with you about what cash flow is, how it's created, and of course then how to maximize it in your business. So really, when you think about cash flow comes about from a very simple premise. Cash flow comes about through the use of assets in your business. Now, when we talk about assets in dentistry, we talk about a couple of key assets. We talk about the physical assets, of course, the chairs, the handpieces, all that physical infrastructure, compressors and the like. We talk about database assets, your goodwill, the patient base and so on. We talk about the HR assets, your team, the number of staff that you have and so on. But of course, we also talk about the intellectual property assets of your business, the systems, the processes, the structures, and how things move in that direction. So of course, understanding that there are assets of various kinds in your business, our role as business owners is to convert those assets into sales. Now, of course, as dentists, we sometimes resile from the word sales, but if we're just using general business speak for the moment, sales are sales, and the purpose of an asset is to generate sales. And from those sales, we want to generate profit. And of course, profit is a fictional number. It's a number that's manipulated very readily by accountants in terms of tax preparation and so on. So it gives an idea of what's going on in the business, but it doesn't really indicate much about the viability because it does not address cash flow. So profit then we want to convert into operating cash and then free cash flow. And once we've got free cash flow, there's really a few things that we can do with it. The first thing you can do is, if you're the owner of the business, you can distribute that cash flow to you as the owner, as a dividend. Alternatively, you can use that free cash flow to reduce debt levels by paying down debt. And thirdly, you can take some of that cash flow and invest it into the purchase of further assets. So really, it's important to understand that cash flow is generated by utilizing assets. And we, in our program, Practice Max, call that sweating the assets. And the business's ability to convert assets to cash flow is a measure of the efficiency of the business. How well the business is able to convert its assets into cash flow measures very, very effectively how efficient the business is at doing that. So business efficiency relates to conversion of assets to cash flow. And that's something that you really need to remember. So let's just have a conversation for a moment about mastering cash flow and indeed maximizing cash flow. If we can agree on the concept that cash is king and cash flow is the oxygen of the business, it makes sense then we want to become very adept at creating it. Now, when it comes to cash flow, there are really only 5 things that you can do to enhance cash flow, and it's important to know how to pull these levers. So the first lever you've got is the ability to generate revenue. And when it comes to generating revenue, it's really going to come back to 3 sub-levers of that. And so really that's going to come back to seeing more patients in your practice, which could come back to marketing. It could come back to capacity. It could come back to efficiency of scheduling. It could come back to any number of things. But first, the way to maximize the revenue of the business is to see more patients. The second way, of course, is to see those patients more frequently. So that means making sure your recall system is tight, you're following up incomplete treatment, you're able to keep people coming through the door, pre-appointing them, and so on and so forth. So it's making sure that you see those patients more regularly. And the third sub-lever when it comes to maximizing revenue is increasing the average transaction size. So what that means is diagnosing comprehensively, and I'm talking about doing this ethically and morally, of course, but diagnosing comprehensively, making sure that we're offering the treatment that we'd want to offer our mum, making sure that we have a full scope of services in our practice so that we don't need to refer things out where we could do them to a high standard ourselves, making sure that we are billing appropriately, making sure we're not discounting unnecessarily, making sure we utilize the item numbers appropriately. And again, just making sure that we stick within the rules there. But there's a variety of things that you can do to increase the transaction size. So when it comes to the first lever of maximizing cash flow, it really comes back to maximizing revenue. And that has 3 sub-levers. See more patients, see them more frequently, and increase the average dollar spend. So that's lever number 1 when it comes to maximizing cash flow. Lever number 2, of course, is minimizing your expenditure. And this is fundamentally important. One of the things I observe when it comes to coaching people is, I speak to lots of people and they've got great revenue, But what comes out the bottom line is often highly diminished and a lot less than it could be because the expense tracking is not really happening as well as it should be. Things get out of hand. And of course, little drips in a tap lead to big puddles. And those little leaks of expenses can add up significantly and very quickly. So it's worthwhile very regularly running your ruler over the expense items in your practice and determining, are you getting a return on that money? Am I getting a return on the investment that I'm about to make? Or am I just fritting some money away and letting it leak out of the practice? So prudent expense management is really, really key. And one of the expenses that gets out of hand a lot, just as an example of this, is consumables. And so we see lots and lots of time where the consumables bill is up around 10%. And really, just as a baseline, it should be in that, somewhere in that 5 to 7%. In our practice, we run at about 3.5%. So I think 5 to 7 is probably even getting a little too high, but certainly no more than that. And one of the reasons that it does get out of line is because if you've got different people in the practice, oftentimes there's, 3 different composites, 4 different bonding systems, several different impression materials and so on. And of course, as I'm saying this, I'm sure there'll be some people kind of either nodding in agreement going, yes, that's us. And there'll be other people saying, no, that's not us. My suggestion though is to go back and check and to streamline what you order, making sure that you minimize the ordering cycles so you're not paying excessive freight. And one of the things that we do in our practice, of course, is we set a budget for our consumables, and our ordering team know that they have to live within that budget. The most profitable airline at the present time is Southwest Airlines, and one of the things that they do in their business is they have one type of aircraft. They have one type of spare parts for that aircraft. They have one type of training that's required to operate that aircraft. And so when you get down to singularity, you get efficiency. And I think, looking at expenses, and particularly in this case, consumables, getting some efficiency through singularity is one key strategy to reduce that consumable expense. Now, of course, there's other expenses in the business and they need to be analyzed critically, as I said a moment ago, just to make sure that you're getting a return on that investment, to make sure that you're getting everything that you need there. So that's lever number 2 in terms of mastering cash flow. Lever number 3 really come back to the balance sheet. So the last 3 levers, in fact, come back to the balance sheet. And the first one of these is to reduce accounts receivable days. Now, for some practices, this is not an issue. People tend to collect the money on the day of treatment generally. But I also know that there are some people who are running accounts, or they've got some bad debts, or they've got extended payment terms, and sometimes they're just not getting that money in fast enough. If you've got money out, that is a massive impact on your cash flow. And so we need to be sure that we're getting money in as quickly as possible. I would suspect that most practices have a pay on the day kind of arrangement. Where this adds up and where it can come unstuck in a dental practice in particular is through bad debts, people not paying on the day for whatever reason. But it can sneak up with payment terms as well. And so we've seen a situation in the past. I know there's a practice I'm aware of who bought a lot of implants up front, and they paid cash for those implants to get a discount. So they spent their cash very quickly. They placed the implants very, very slowly. This is tying into inventory days, of course. But what they did is they extended the payment terms on those implants that were placed for such a long period of time that by the time they spent their money, they didn't get it back very quickly because of the payment terms. And indeed, there's bad debt around that as well. So they spent money, got it in slowly, and then had bad debts. So of course, I'm kind of meshing in a few of these other levers as we go, but just as we think about this, it's important to make sure your receivable days are well in check. And the fourth lever, it ties into what I just spoke about, and that is inventory days. Again, I mentioned a moment ago that having one type of composite, one type of bonding system is useful in terms of reducing expenditure, but it's also very useful in terms of minimizing inventory days. We want to turn our stock over. We want to turn our consumables over. We don't want things sitting on the shelf for long periods of time, because what sits on the shelf represents cash. and we want to be able to, turn that into cash very, very quickly. So another version of inventory days is work in progress. So that could also mean lab bills. And so making sure you're getting quick turnaround in your lab jobs is another version of inventory days. So when we think about inventory days, again, it's really important just to turn that over quickly. And the business that does that very, very effectively is Dell Computers. Dell Computers, from memory, have inventory days of 4 hours. So what that means is if I go on to Dell, order a computer, within 4 hours, those parts have arrived from the suppliers. They've been turned into a computer and then shipped, which is an incredible turnover of inventory. And yet when I see lots of dental practices, there's things that are gathering cobwebs, things that haven't been used since 1977, and of course things going out of date. So we've got to make sure we do turn the inventory days over. So that, of course, is lever number 4. Lever number 5 is to increase your payable days. And again, I'm not suggesting for one moment that anyone is a bad payer or anyone breaches the terms of agreement with their suppliers. It's really important to have good relationships with suppliers because they give us the things that we need to be able to conduct our business. But what that means, of course, is that as time moves forward, we've got to be able to take advantage of payment terms. So the general rule of thumb is get the money in quickly and pay it out as slowly as is ethically possible. And so if you're given payment terms on an invoice, use those terms. If you've got 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, use those terms within reason. Now, if it makes sense for you to you batch your payments or do whatever it is, of course you're going to need to find a system that works. But ultimately, maximizing cash flow is based on the premise that we get our cash in quickly, we turn over our inventory, and of course we then pay out cash as slow as reasonably possible. So there you have it, folks. Maximizing cash flow. Cash flow is the oxygen that keeps the business alive. There's 5 levers to pull. Just to recap, increase the revenue of the business. That makes sense. And I gave you the 3 tools to do that. Reduce your expenses. We want to make sure that we're getting a return on every dollar spent. Make sure that we reduce or eliminate our receivable so that we're getting money in quickly. Make sure that we're reducing our inventory days, turning stock over so we're not leaving money sitting on the shelf. And of course, taking advantage of payment terms so that we can extend our payable days. And if you can do that, then you're going to maximize the cash flow in your business. And when you maximize the cash flow in your business, you're going to have the opportunity to distribute more to yourselves as the owner, to reduce debt if that's a thing in your practice, and of course to invest in further assets so you can keep that flywheel turning to generate even more cash flow. So in this series, as I said, we're going to be talking about metrics that matter. How do we make our business really rock? And I think the first one that we really need to focus on, which we've done today, is around mastering cash flow. So I hope you find that useful. I hope you find that helpful. But more importantly, I hope you put that into place so that you can get the cash flow really rocking along in your own business. So that's it from me this week. I hope you all have a tremendous week ahead, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.